How does the EU perceive the BRICS' growing economic coordination amid the US trade policies under Trump? And do you think could this lead to a realignment of the global economic alliances?
I'm delighted to join you today live from Paris. It's a very good question. I think, BRICS is just a label. And actually, BRICS was a label invented by an Anglo-American financial economist. And so initially, BRICS had no political or geopolitical meaning. It was just a grouping of emerging markets that some bankers in London and New York find interesting to invest in if you were a rich Western pension fund or investment bank. So the world changed a lot because today BRICS no longer has that sort of financial trading connotation. It's becoming a geoeconomic, geopolitical force. Of course, in the BRICS, there's one which is bigger than all the others. It is China. So clearly, the BRICS first, and with all due respect for Brazil, Russia, and India, and South Africa, it's a way for China to spread its wings beyond and above Asia. And of course, if you look at the other side of the coin, which is Europe and America trying to contain and constrain China, they don't like the idea of China spreading its wings, right? And what is very interesting is on his first day in office, President Trump talked for hours about the Panama Canal, and people in Europe, because they are not very smart, they mocked him. Why does he focus on the Panama Canal? And he also spoke about Greenland, and the same silly European said, "Oh, he wants to invade Greenland." But what Trump said about Greenland and the Panama Canal is linked to China and the BRICS, and it's linked to the idea of, through the BRICS, Chinese exporters, Chinese infrastructure investment companies, Chinese civil engineering companies deploying their skills and their money and their presence the world over. Greenland is about the Northwest Passage. As climate changes, there is now a new Northwest Passage connecting America, Canada to Asia, going through the North Pole, through Greenland. And the Panama Canal is about the presence of Chinese engineers in Panama and Brazil and Costa Rica, building gigantic infrastructure investments, airports, ports, and canals. And so America realized that with President Trump, and America is now playing that new great game for supremacy. Europe increasingly is getting marginalized because Europe doesn't have the will to play that new great game, and they don't have the money and the resources and the skills. So I think as the Chinese-American rivalry accelerates, directly or indirectly through the BRICS, because in Brazil, let's not forget, in Brazil today, there are whole sectors of the Brazilian economy that are under heavy Chinese influence. So as China spreads its wings the world over, the new Silk Road, the Belt and...
Mr. Firzli, let me stop at China spreading its wings, and we have Mr. Huan from Beijing. Mr. Huan, do you agree with Mr. Firzli claiming that it's time for China to spread its wings as a financial power, but with China's Premier Li Qian representing Beijing at a time when the President Xi Jinping has not attended the summit since 2012? What message does this send about China's current foreign policy priorities? And do you agree with what Mr. Firzli is saying?
China don't want to do any geopolitical competition with the USA, and China always believed that the BRICS cooperation mechanism offers the most important platform for cooperation among emerging markets and developing countries in the world. It's an important force for realizing an equal and ordinary multipolar world and universal, beneficial, and inclusive economic globalization. So the global South countries are important players in promoting the reform of the global governance system and have been committed to safeguard multilateralism and defending fairness and justice, and also promoting common development. So China attaches great importance to and will actively participate in the BRICS cooperation.
In the BRICS conference. Well, Mr. Firzli, with key BRICS leaders absent from Rio, including Xi and Putin, does this weaken, do you think, the bloc's diplomatic leverage or signal a shift towards more pragmatic multilateralism?
I don't think the physical absence is such a big deal. Clearly, the Chinese prime minister is someone very important in China. So he's representing, China at a very high level. And the Chinese prime minister, in the new balance of power inside the governing elite in China, the Politburo of the Central Committee of the Chinese Communist Party, in that elite of the elite, the Chinese prime minister is himself focusing more and more on economy, finance, economic development. So his presence in Rio makes perfect sense. President Putin is tied up in the war in Ukraine. So I think it's not about the ICC. It's like really he's focusing now on the war, and he can't afford outside of Moscow for a week, right? So I think that's the main reason. The current Brazilian government is a center-left, third worldist, if you will, government, and they are very close to both China and Russia. And let's not forget the elephant in the room, right? The elephant in the room is Donald Trump. He's the big one we don't talk about, but we should talk about here. The BRIC equation changed a lot 5 months ago when President Trump entered the White House, because Trump is not a neoliberal, he's not a neoconservative. So, the previous US administrations, Biden, Hillary Clinton, Obama, Bush, Cheney, and even the first Trump White House 8 years ago, when Trump was first elected, he had limited room for maneuver because the Republican Party was still dominated 8 years ago by the neoconservatives. Today, it's a different world because Trump crushed and freed of the neoconservatives at home in America, in Washington. So we're entering a new era, an era of neorealism. And I think neorealism is the language which both the Trump...
Can you explain more and elaborate more, sir, about the neorealism that Trump, you think, is carrying out? In what sense? What is that?
Trump,
How different is it than before, as you just stated?
Yeah. So Trump sees the world as it is. He's not preaching fake morality. Very often when Joe Biden or Emmanuel Macron speak, they speak about good and evil, like George W. Bush or Tony Blair, moralizing. Trump doesn't have time to waste on morality. He's blunt. He's a blunt realist.
More pragmatic, you mean?
Yeah, much more pragmatic, his enemies say verging on Machiavellian, but it's good. He's a realist. So for him, the fact that the BRICS is you have countries like, let's say, India, China, Russia, they may not conform purely to the quote-unquote beautiful liberal democratic norms, supposedly, of Berlin, Paris, and Jeffersonian democracy. Trump couldn't care less. He looks at the world very bluntly. The global south is rising. It's a fact. China, India, Brazil, Russia are rising. It's a fact. And he views many of the BRICS as pivot nations. What does it mean, pivot nation? It's a very important concept. In that new great game, where Europe is increasingly marginalized, you only have two big powers left, China and America.
Yeah.
And the pivot nations are Brazil, South Africa, Russia, India. They are BRICS countries. And Trump would like to see them kind of neutral in that new Cold War or great game. And so Trump is not hostile to the BRICS.